This is the Ed Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Matthew Stranick, and I'm in Kamloops, British Columbia, on the traditional lands of Tk'emlúp-te-Secwépemc within Secwépemc-Ulu, the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwépemc people. Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Matt Stranick and Dr. Doug Reed here with you for the Good Friday edition. Good Friday. It's not just because I was kind of flaky with the schedule this week. It actually was. But in any event, in any instance, happy Easter weekend and welcome to the Ed Non-Tech Podcast. Doug, how are you doing this weekend, sir?
I'm doing really well. It's great to be back at it, and I'm looking forward to this week's chat.
Yeah, totally. It's always a good time. And just FYI, in case people can't tell from my background surroundings, I'm using hotel Wi-Fi on a laptop computer as opposed to my ultra powerful thing back in Kamloops with the desktop computer. So any issues or instances of technical glitches or other malfeasance, I will blame squarely on that aspect of it. But Doug, before we get too far into it, you've recently made some improvements to your technology setup, and being that this is the Ed Non-Tech Podcast, perhaps you'd like to just describe that a little bit for our vast and good-looking listenership.
Yeah, thanks for that. This is the fourth different audio system collaboration that I've tried to put together, because every once in a while I sound like Daffy Duck or Fozzie the Bear, and I'm trying to get to something that sounds slightly more like me on a regular basis. So I did the opposite of what you did, and There was about a week there where I was kicking myself because yours works so well, because you bought your whole unit as one piece, and here you go. And I, being just who I am, I had to buy a mic, and then I had to buy a stand, and then I had to buy the different guards, and then I had to buy 3 different cables, and I got it working. But part of the delay was me trying to get these pieces sourced from various places, and I know more about microphones now than I ever did before. So it's a good learning experience, and hopefully I don't sound like a cartoon character.
Well, you sound entirely three-dimensional, as it were, and quite frankly, I am noticing, even through my limited capacity at my end, it does sound at first glance with my ears pretty slick. So I guess I think that's kind of an interesting vantage point on your whole approach. I was having a conversation with a 12-year-old over dinner a few nights back, and we got into this whole concept of metacognition. And the 12-year-old, much to her credit, she just she got onto it right away. She's just like, yeah, I think about how I'm thinking about stuff all the time, and I'm like, okay, so this kind of gives me a level of hope. It's like if a bright, a brilliant actually 12-year-old, but still a 12-year-old nonetheless, can sort of twig onto that, then surely this venture that we're embarking on here, as we've discussed, things like learning and teaching vis-a-vis technology and the importance of metaphor and all those good things. I mean, it's nice that the wider, non-specialized public can, get onto that really quickly. So, yeah, that's just kind of a thing,
Part of non-specialized is everybody learns.
It's true.
Right? You don't have choice. You had to learn at some point. So we have a few more pieces of paper behind us and some more experience.
Yeah.
With strategies and ways to make it work. So, and for me, with my audio recordings, this is it's my fourth. And if we ever get to the point of we're writing stuff up, I would love to grab snippets of each of the four and just take a look at the evolution of what we've tried and what worked and what didn't work and all that sort of silliness.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that'd be dope, to use a term that I use pretty dang often. I think this all leads us really well, Doug, into the topic which you've selected. I was doing that quasi-intentionally, we're talking about teaching presence within the community of inquiry, the COI framework and model that we've discussed in the past. So I think this is the second COI episode, if I'm not,
second of four, yes.
Second of four, right. So we kind of did the overview, general intro a few episodes back, and now we're striking it again with they're not as per the model arranged hierarchically, quite the opposite. We're starting with I guess, why was teaching presence the one we're going with initially? Just what was your inkling there, bud?
We're both teachers.
That's true.
And that was part of it. So I was more comfortable with that topic at the beginning.
Okay.
And then I jumped into the DCOI MOOC, DCOIMOOC.org, and they had a bunch of stuff on teacher presence at the beginning of the MOOC. And it's like, yes, baby, that's where we're starting.
Can you refer a little bit more, just because maybe people are listening or watching this just for the first time? DCI, what does that refer to?
It's Community of Inquiry MOOC, and I'm really not sure what the D is.
Okay.
But I know that the Commonwealth of Learning has
maybe distance community inquiry, DCI.
Yeah, okay. Or distributed,
but it's yeah.
It just the Athabasca University, a couple of Athabasca University people are involved with it, because that's where a lot of the COI literature originally came from.
Yep, true.
And so that's why I'm not sure if it's distance or distributed. And actually, I didn't look it up because I'm just more interested in the COI part than the D part.
So yeah, a MOOC, again, one of these so-called open and freely accessible courses. At least that was sort of the initial gambit. And far be it from us to go into any kind of lengthy historical unpacking of the MOOC concept, although we probably could do that. Just to say that it kind of evolved from open courseware and open curriculum and open syllabi kind of movements that have been around for quite some time, notably with Harvard and MIT and some of these sort of so-called Ivy League or whatever top-ranked U.S. institutions, but then also through such open so-called web delivery formats as per people like George Siemens, Stephen Downes, and a whole range of other folks about 10 years ago at this point. And apart from beyond all that, it is cool that one of these kinds of courses is considered viable, I guess, for a discussion about COI. My doctoral work was based on MOOCs and COI, so the fact that I haven't put my beak into that particular pond is both perplexing and regrettable, I think. But I'm glad that my esteemed colleague, Dr. Doug, here is on the case. So thanks for that, Doug. I hope you'll be providing some linkage and possibly some commentary in the show notes about that.
Oh, yeah. And a big chunk of the reason why I wanted to even tackle this topic was because that's where your doctoral research was.
That's very mighty kind of you, sir. Mighty kind of you, gotta say. Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, so I guess before sort of diving into it overly much, I mean, apart from learning a little bit more about your preferred tech configuration, are there any other kind of general life lessons or learnings of significance since the past 2 weeks or whatever it's been, Bud? Anything you want to speak to there?
The big thing is how I grappled with the show notes for this week.
Okay.
Because this is our first deeper dive, right?
Right.
Remember, as we were taking, for people that didn't listen to the last episode,
yeah,
what we did is we're changing the format slightly as we mature.
Yeah.
And part of it is what I've normally done is I've read a bunch of research and then presented 3 or 4 things and our thoughts on certain topics. And this time, since it's a deeper dive, I've come up with more definitional things first before I go to the literature. And I want to see if that works. I want to see if that works to help explain what we're talking about and where we're coming from.
Fantabulous, man. And just as I sort of go through it, just looking in here through what you prepared, indeed, we've got 9 pages, but I am pleased to see that a great amount of that consists of images.
Yeah, I lost the plot a little bit. I was like, oh, this one's cool. Oh, this one's cool. Oh, this one works. So
welcome to my friggin' living daily life. I'm telling you. Okay, so that's all friggin' fine and dope. I
do have one more new thing.
Please do.
Because Instagram is a thing.
Yep.
We are going to have stickers with our new logo.
That is friggin'. I'm all about the podcast specific branding and merch. That is just that is sick on a stick, is what that is. That's psyched. I'm psyched for that, man. You said it's going to be about 3 weeks before you get them back from the manufacturer.
Yeah. They it's a deal. It was like 96% off the first 25 that you buy, so we're getting like 25 of them for $1, and it's like I can wait 3 weeks. I spent the $1. I spent the whole $1.
For savings like that in this economy, of course you can. My goodness.
Yeah, and I'm a sucker for merch, and I'm really proud of the logo. I really like the logo.
Well, again, I do anticipate you're going to be able to give me a high-ish resolution JPEG or image file of other variety, such that we can or I can start plastering the sticker prominently across any both the website, the WordPress, and any other affiliated media, such as what goes out to the podcasts and such, right? So
for sure.
Yeah.
So I'll have to take the image that I got created on IMG Creator, the Illustrator AI that I ended up using, because I did not develop that myself.
Okay. So, like, for me, I'm starting to recognize now where I've been out of the educational field within an institutional context, because I'm watching this whole AI discussion and use kind of morph from like this ripple that was really far away when I was kind of on my way out from Thompson Rivers, and now it's just like this wave that's kind of crested, and it's like, it's almost, people are like, is it a tsunami? Should I go surfing on it? Is it safe? What the flying frig, man or ma'am, or trans. surfing the wave, the cultural moment is for everyone, and I'm pleased to see this show, you on behalf of this show, taking a practical, non-hysterical, creative approach towards using it. This is like, just everybody chill the fuck out about AI, please. It's not the end of anything. It's not the beginning of anything. It's just human culture manifesting in some pretty predictable ways, right? So that's my opinion.
And for listeners, we did our first show on AI in education back in December sometime. Like it was
true.
It was a while ago. And the way I'm using it now is the way I use all technology. Is it a tool that can help? Good. Right?
Well,
did I have to change my assessment? Okay, I changed my assessment.
So you're doing, so you've kind of honed in on the image crafting element of it, right? One thing that I've been kind of doing, apart from just kind of twiddling my thumbs and posting weird stuff on social media, is actually with the other podcast, the punk music one. I did at a fairly significant expense. Financially anyway, but not in terms of energy or effort. But I ran off 20 T-shirts for the punk music podcast. And I just thought, okay, nice to have a souvenir. I put the logo on the front and then hashtag and the website on the back. So for the T-shirt manufacturer, it was actually the equivalent of doing 40 T-shirts. So hence the expense. But it was brilliant, and I'm glad that I did it. And one of the reasons that it turned out to be really awesome is that, each person who kind of contacted me saying, well, yes, I would like this free weird T-shirt, Matt Stranek. I got to have sort of a little mini interaction with them just insofar as getting their mailing address and stuff. And one of these dudes, one of these friends of mine from like high school who I haven't seen in decades, but still, Facebook being what it is, he actually, my friend Glenn, has actually been posting a series of artistic, visuals that he's using AI as a tool to create it. So, and then similarly, I'm here in Kelowna. I sort of have a lady friend that I'm kind of hanging out with a bit here, and her lovely family. And one of her daughters, is quite a creative writer, a young girl, and I've been encouraging that as much as I can, as much as my encouragement means anything. But watching her with her phone, she almost uses it as like a dictionary and a thesaurus at the same time. So she goes into she's kind of writing her poem or whatever, and it's brilliant and it's beautiful. And then she just kind of asks, the AI, what's this kind of word or thought, and it'll give her a couple of words or even like a complete little phrase, and she chooses from among them. She uses her critical discretion and she slides it in. So to me, how is that an illegitimate or intellectually or artistically dishonest thing? It's really not. So as just somebody who's fascinated by human creativity, I see, what you and these other people are kind of up to with it. And it's like, okay, the sky is not falling, motherfuckers, chill your pants, right? A bit. So.
No, it's helping. And it's in the olden days, which was like, 4 months ago, right? You had to ask other people. Right?
Totally,
Instead
right?
of, hey, what's another word? Or go to the paper dictionary or thesaurus on your shelf and look. Instead, this is just another way to get the information.
It's not that far removed from predictive analytics. If you can swallow predictive analytics, which, for people who are just like, what even is that? But I mean, if you know what they are, and if you've ever used the thing in a search engine where you start to type and it gives you the options as you type. I mean, really, that's it. The scope and the functionality and the infrastructure are all pretty different, but at its root, it's really, just another variant of a search engine, It doesn't do anything without a human input. And even if it did something without a human input, what's it doing besides chattering to itself or with other AI? As long as you don't friggin' have it linked to the nuclear launch codes or whatnot. I mean, really, keep them away out of I was trying to think of clever things to call Donald Trump now. The gangsta in chief, whatever. Just keep him out of his stubby, weird little criminal fingers, and you're probably going to be okay, right? So, yeah. Anyway, we veered pretty far away from COI at this point, but a robust discussion of our learnings and the contemporary moment. It is conversations about education, technology, and culture, after all, right? So,
absolutely.
Anyway, man, so what do we got in these notes? What do you want to speak
So-
to first here, bud?
So what I really want to take a look at is the difference between teaching and teacher presence.
Oh,
Because
swell.
those
Okay.
those are two different things, and it talks about refining roles, right? It's just
Okay.
like, oh, I know what a teacher did because I sat in that classroom for 13 years. And it's like,
Yes.
no, that's not what teachers do now. And some of that stuff probably wasn't what teachers should have been doing 30, 40, 80 years ago. But we know better now. We're moving forward.
And in 20 years, they're going to be saying they were so bass-ackwards back then. But
Yeah.
I do like the notion here that teaching is something, the practice of which is contextually bound. I think that's kind of one of our tenets here within the show that we can agree with. And further, that it changes over time as a function of necessity, just because, it's like, I've encountered this. I'm going to keep flogging, Marcus Aurelius. This is Marcus Aurelius, the graphic novel, which I'm just about finished. I think I'm going to wrap that up today. That's going to be an Easter
right
present
on.
to myself. But the notion here that you never put your toe in the same river twice. I think I mentioned that, in another episode, in as much as the water is always different. It's always a different water every time you go there. And further to that, you yourself are constituently, different, all the flesh, all, everything about you from your physique to your mentality will have changed, right? Since the last time you put your foot in that river. So to me, this is simply a facet of that, right? This whole notion of teaching as, it's always going to be different, even when it feels the same, as a habit or whatnot. So I think that's very compelling, dude.
At one point, I was teaching 2 different grade 5 classes.
Yep.
And so I taught the social studies lesson to one grade 5 class, and it was fantastic. It went so well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, perfect. I'm doing that exact same thing again.
Boom.
And then, later that day, I tried to teach the same lesson, and it's a mess. It's a disaster because I tried to dip my toe in the same river. It didn't happen, right? It was
the other thing is you're a batter. It's baseball season now. I don't follow pro ball baseball, but it's like you knocked it out of the park with that first one, and you just think, okay, I'm facing a different batter, a different pitcher, but I'm gonna have my same stance in place, and I'm gonna just use the same, and then 3 strikes and you are out, or you hit a foul into the stands or whatever, right?
Yeah,
so
that's exactly what
we got a paucity of possible metaphor here, quite frankly. But I think again, what you've highlighted here is really important. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you wanted to speak to in terms of that distinction, Bud, between teaching and teacher presence?
The big bit is the distance or the distributed component, right? Depending, or open or whatever. Whatever the people are not in a shared space-to-face environment, whatever we want to call that these days. And it's how are we building a climate where there's plenty of opportunities for learners to develop relationships with trust and openness, right? Like how does that happen? Because if there's no trust in a relationship, I don't learn well.
Well, I think what you're speaking to is a good example of the necessary overlap between teaching presence as well as social presence and cognitive presence. Again, my deeply, I've been really going on about my affinity for Venn diagrams throughout the life of this program thus far. And it really does come back to, the COI aspect of it, because in order, as you say, for teaching to occur well, there has to be this notion of trust. Well, where does trust come from? It comes from largely opportunities for social dynamics. And, I haven't necessarily checked the COI literature just because I haven't needed to really for the past however many years, particularly. But, as per my understanding from my studies, is that social presence is sort of considered a precursor, if you will, to the teaching and the teaching and cognitive pieces. in as much as you say, there's got to be trust, there's got to be comfort. People have to be free to be themselves within proper boundaries, of course, within the academic environment. So that all plays out. That area of overlap that is certainly profound and important, and without which you're not going to get very far. So
true enough. And if you take a look how society has changed, go back 40, 50, 80, 100 years, right? Trust was built in because your teacher knew, your professor knew. You had to do that because they were the expert, right? That's where the trust was. It was do it the way I want it and you'll get a good grade.
We didn't have this notion of distributed expertise across a worldwide network of humans and network infrastructure. So I mean, anybody who's sort of still clinging to that authoritative paradigm of like this knowledge is physically located within my body, and the only way to get to it is if you give my body adequate inputs such that I, in my benevolence and magnanimousness, can then dispense upon y'all. It's like, that's just, it was retrograde then, but now, it's even more than retrograde. It's just patently absurd. And you can either, sort of leverage it and flap your wings and sort of go some interesting places, or you can not necessarily put your head in the sand, but I don't know, you're liable to end up on some hunter's dinner plate, quite frankly, at this stage in the game. How many convoluted metaphors can I stuff into one episode? That remains to be seen.
You had a bunch of 3 and 4 syllable words in there, and then you messed me up with y'all.
Y'all. I've been getting that from some of the people I hang out with. They're like, you kind of talk, like a goof. You kind of talk like a hillbilly, but then you drop in these polysyllables. Yeah, and it's just like I get it, but I don't understand it. I've gotten that at various points, But anyways, takes a lot of different birds to make a bird soup. Says the vegan.
Yeah, dude, I haven't had bird soup. But
I got you. You must have had bird soup. I've had bird soup.
Nope.
Okay, well.
But anyway, I'm going to jump into a Garrison article. His
2021 Please steer this back in. Sir.
It's the teaching presence meta-analysis from the community inquiry that he put in. And he had this one line that I just loved. It was, to be clear, leadership manifested as TP is essential to initiate and sustain critical inquiry in an educational environment.
Well, you got to have rules, to play a sport, right? It's like what Ezra Pound said about free verse, Robert Frost. Robert Frost, turn of the early 20th century notable poet. Two paths diverged in the woods, and I took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference. That guy, he's actually a brilliant writer, in my opinion. But what his commentary about, the modernist movement, including Ezra Pound, including those William Carlos Williams and those kinds of people, is free verse or blank verse. It's like playing tennis without a net. It's sort of like teaching presence. Without it, people sometimes I think make the mistake of you're like, well, I'm a constructivist educator and I try and facilitate learning. People sort of sometimes think of that as being a cheat somehow. It's like, oh, so you just sort of step back and, let them go wild. It's like, no, it's the opposite of that. You have to have contingency upon plan in place so that you can, adapt and pivot in the moment to deal with, address whom you're actually learning with, or helping in the moment, right? It actually takes a very broad and varied and deep skill set. So I appreciate the fact you're highlighting that, dude.
Yeah, you can't abdicate the responsibility of your leadership role.
Exactly.
You're in there. You've got to help the students somehow, and sometimes it's putting barriers in place, and sometimes it's leading them down a path, and sometimes it's letting them go. But you got to roll with that to figure that out. And doing it online is even harder because you don't get any of the physical cues. and you don't have any of that energy that you get in a face-to-face classroom. So the only thing I didn't like was when Garrison mentioned it as TP, right? Because when I think of TP, I'm not thinking of teaching presence.
You're thinking of something that goes in trees on Halloween night, potentially.
Yeah. So that's why in the notes you'll see like the square brackets with teaching presence behind it, because it's just I hate when people use abbreviations and it's like, okay, now I got to think about it because you were too lazy to write 2 words that you wrote earlier.
I'm thinking tree. I'm thinking tree presence because I got a new tattoo of a tree. So
that's right on.
Yeah. Anyway,
any chance that can go into the notes? So,
I've sort of shamelessly hyped the latest artwork by my son enough on social media. I'm sure I got a perfectly adequate picture to include there, and I don't know. We can maybe put your little. Actually, your little. It wouldn't take much to sort of engineer this into an EnT, wouldn't it? A tree person.
No,
just put
that's
like a
what
little,
it is.
Just put like a little happy face up here on top, a little head or something. Just like, I'm not going to do that, Kai, if you're listening, which I'm sure you're not. But for the purposes of branding or whatnot across non-flesh media. Yeah. The EnT, the mighty EnT, tree presence. I think there might be a paper to be had there. Teaching with trees.
Yeah. They're shepherds of the forest. They're the ones that help guide the forest.
Might be a paper or papers to be had. You see what I got? You see what I'm going there with? Trees are made of paper.
Oh, I do now.
Chill dad vibes. Chill dad jokes is what that should say.
It
should.
At some point, we're going to need that to see your other T-shirt. The one that.
You know what?
We just next time. Next time. It doesn't have to be this time.
Well,
or it is going to be this time. Okay.
We can go a little bit long on this episode because it's the holiday. Just un momento, por favor. Like literally, just.
No worries. So while he, there you go.
Yeah, literally. Okay, so we got 3 of these left, 2 mediums and 1 small. So we got the front.
So it's
right
today, New Brunswick, tomorrow, the world.
Yes, and these are properly licensed graphics. I joined Shutterstock, their website for officially licensed graphics, did the free trial, and then promptly switched out of it when I got what I needed so I wouldn't be billed.
Right.
That's the front. And then on the back, hashtag, and then and I've actually got there are children and adults in Kelowna who have worn this shirt in public, and I've sent them out across, basically from here to Atlantic Canada, including you, in various colors and sizes. So I think your ENT sticker notion, I'm actually taking that and turning it into fridge magnets. Once I get the sticker, just like or whatever. So multifaceted branding efforts, which in themselves sort of convey a spirit of playfulness and a certain level of technical proficiency, as it were. But we digress. Mostly me. Again.
That's okay.
Sure. So what else did you find about Garrison? I mean, I guess just like my opinion, one of the things I enjoyed the most when I was sort of doing my, study with Garrison and colleagues, the writing is that it was very clear. It was very relatively, I mean, I get what you mean about the acronym thing, but, relatively jargon free as far as it goes. And one of the things that I found actually about COI, particularly when I was at College of North Atlantic at the earlier part of my career, when I was sort of just rolling this out with some people, is that, people without significant background within the subfield of education or whatever, you can show them the diagram, you can kind of explain it in a few bullet points, and they get the gist of it. It's helpful with very limited exposure, with very limited usage, and that to me is one of the benefits of it. It's broadly applicable, and that's why it's persisted for more than 20 years, and has really adapted itself well to contemporary formats. For instance, such as this MOOC which you've been experimenting with, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, man.
I just love the way Garrison writes, because he's to the point, and he's not fluffy. He's articulate. So that's how I like to read, right? It's like, get to the point. Don't give me 5 pages of background on what shoes one of the participants wore. I don't care, right?
I got less of my life in front of me today than I did yesterday. Each hour is actually worth more to me as I have fewer of them. So I appreciate conciseness and clarity in ways that I didn't necessarily as an undergraduate or whatnot, right? So again, this is something where I think teachers and educators can kind of leverage, their being further ahead in terms of a career or in terms of typically an age cohort, that because your perception of time, right? Time is a pretty key quantity in our existence. It's you're looking at it from a different vantage point. So we're talking about all the things that kind of go behind the curriculum that gets expressed, the so-called hidden curriculum, as sort of a below the surface of the tiny little iceberg that's sticking up there of a learning event, right? So I think COI addresses both the visible and the explicit, and also the implicit or the sort of subterranean aspects of it. It encompasses it really quite well. And the fact that it goes back to one of your faves that you've mentioned, John Dewey, one of these original OG progressive educators from 100-ish years ago. There's a continuity there of tradition, which I think can be helpful when people are like, well, what even is this? Well, is it documented? Is it written about? Well, as a matter of fact, it is. Okay, so if you're trying if ever e-learning, at this juncture in our history needed to be justified, it's not like it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It's like, what? That's an online program? Well, what good is that? You didn't really. It's like, it's exactly a reflection of where we are now. It's exactly, and it's possible to do it in an organized, thoughtful way that's backed up by references and a gamut of literature and practice. And I am talking way too much on this, dude. I think we've hit something that I might be a little bit slightly interested in, so.
Dude, I love listening to passion. I love it when people know what they're talking about. And
I don't make that qualification, but I do cop to the passion. I will admit that. Yeah. So.
Okay, I'm going to jump to Caledon quick, the 2016 Teaching Presence and Online Students Course Satisfaction. And it talks about how they went and did some measurements with students, and they said teaching present was a strong positive factor associated with course satisfaction. Right? And if there's less teaching presence, then people weren't as happy.
I can vouch for that. I taught a course for University of New Brunswick, an elective course, over a period of like 4 or 5 years. I was the instructor of record. And there was this one summer, I'd gotten back from Ontario. I'd gotten to Ontario from Qatar not that long ago. I was deep into a full-time job. I was deep into my family life. I was deep into, trying to get the doctorate finished. And one summer, I was just like, what if I do the minimal level of facilitation? And I had a friggin' mutiny, almost, where it basically, it came to the point when the chair had to check in and just like, I've been getting some pretty concerned emails, and I'm like, okay, I hear that, and it got better as far as that goes. The ship didn't sink across, before the end of the term, but that was important for me to learn. May have factored into why I wasn't invited back to teach that again, very much, but still. That was like, that's how I learned about the vital necessity of what you're talking about. It's like, you can't be too heavy-handed, but God forbid you step too far back, because just, the balance is vitally, vitally important.
Yeah, and it just is, and so many of us have learned it so many different ways when other stuff is going on, or you just don't know. Whatever, life happens, right? It's like, let's try this, let's try that.
So, and this is where, again, having a framework and having a good body of practice, I mean, as well as hopefully colleagues who are sort of there to kind of be around and support you. This is one of those things where, I do sometimes wonder about the support that's available to instructors working in primarily distance settings. I don't know how much teaching fully online that you've done within your career, Doug.
I've done quite a bit.
Yeah, and I guess for me, when I was doing my thing for UNB, and also I did a little bit with the University of Calgary, it's I'm sitting at my home in a laptop, not using university resources particularly, except a learning management shell. And as a junior career person, very early in my career at that point, I was sort of thinking, well, okay, I'm just going to improvise and do what I can. And it was pretty hit and miss. But one thing that would have been valuable to me was actually having, regular access to other colleagues within the department or other sessionals or whatever, social presence to support my presence as a teacher, at the time. And I think probably that kind of thing has come further along than it was, 5 to 10 years ago at various institutions. But I think it does speak a little bit more to the need, as you said, about the things online. It's like you're so far removed from the physical experience. You're so far removed from having an embodied thing around you that you really got to work conscientiously and with a good amount of effort, both in your planning and your delivery, but even just in your interactions. I mean, you really almost are obliged to go in there more frequently because of an online thing than you might otherwise do in a face-to-face setting between those sessions, right? So.
Yes, and what you just did is you're going to make me skip an article. So I'm going to skip an article and come down to Ecole and Garrison, the development of community inquiry over time in an online learning course.
Yep.
And when you start talking about planning, one thing that really messes people up with their learning presence or their teaching presence is that you talked about the infrastructure that's around you, but the design happens before.
Yes.
And can
you elaborate just a bit more on that for other people?
Sure. When you start teaching a course, especially online or at a distance, you make a deal with the students. Here's your course outline or syllabus or whatever your institution calls it.
Yeah.
And here's what you're going to teach. Here's some of the content. Here's the structure for the assessment. Here's the resources. Here's all that stuff. Of course, we're going to supplement it with other things, but that design happens first.
Yes.
And it's easier to build a train track when the train is not actively on the track.
Boom! We're just bringing out the metaphors all over the place. Try to stop it, man. That's dope.
Yeah, we retrofit stuff and we try to make things work on the fly, but it's all a patch job.
Yes.
It's all, okay, I'm making a change. Let's make this change. And the design and organization should be invisible a lot of the time. It should just be there when the students show up.
Right.
And that, because I have a pretty little diagram that I ripped out of that article, right? And it's like how much time and what matters more, right? It's like, is facilitating discussion more important, or is the direct instruction more important?
Yes, that lovely line or the dot chart there. That's dope.
Yeah. And what they came up with, because it's their chart, it's not mine. It's like, by the end of the course, right, the design and organization really isn't that important, and you shouldn't have to be putting a lot of time into it. Your time should be spent doing the other things, the direct instruction and the facilitated discourse. So like when we start doing that, it's like when you build a house, right? If you have a hole in the ground and you put the basement in and then you build the house, that's great. When you buy a house and reno it, ugh, that's so much harder. It takes so much more time. And is it actually better, or are you just putting lipstick on a pig, right? Like, what's going on there?
Don't send the pig to the slaughterhouse for bacon, folks. That's
No.
all I'm gonna.
Oh no, I like pigs. So
I'm just doing my self-righteous vegan thing because I saw a very brief opportunity there. Your metaphor is thoughtful and well placed. And just as you were sort of speaking to that, again, just to kind of speak to the helpfulness, I guess, of the COI, you sort of referred to within that diagram about facilitating discourse and direct instruction, design and organization. Those functions, those categories within the teaching presence. But actually, one of the cool things about COI and what makes it more applicable is, in addition to categories, there are also indicators that go with each of those categories. So you have a presence, each with a number of categories, and then each with a number of indicators. So like I was just literally I put in a quick Google just now of COI categories, indicators, and there's a table with each of the presences. And then, so for teaching presence, it's got categories listed: design and organization, facilitating discourse, direct instruction, like you just referred to. Yep. But then it also has indicators. So an example of an indicator for design and organization would be setting curriculum and methods, facilitating discourse, shaping constructive exchange, direct instruction, focusing and resolving issues. And then, it's not that far of a leap to go from those indicators to actually specific, contextually valid strategies. So it's just like literally one column to another column to a third column, and then the fourth column is almost just like, well, you can start filling that in yourself, or you can visit your local teaching and learning center for some assistance in that way. Because we heart TLCs, right? Saw what I did there?
Yeah, I am not doing that YMCA dance thing.
A little too Mickey Mouse for you at this point, dude. I'm sorry, man.
No, I'm scared of hitting the new mic. I need the microphone to be a little older.
I'm just trying to roll with the chill dad vibes a bit, pretend I'm explaining this to my kid a bit, right? But
now along that line, what you just described, the DCOI MOOC, they have an activity piece at the end, right? If you want to get the piece of paper that says you completed it and all that.
The digital parchment, sure, yeah.
Yeah, they built it all in to say, okay, what's your activity, what's your plan, or whatever, and they put all those in drop downs just to make it easier, so we didn't have to dig around and find all the stuff. It's so sweet. It helps learners so much.
Well, and you just reminded me of, like, when I was in the seminar with Dr. Garrison that first semester when I was, in Calgary doing the residency aspect of the program, he, just sort of casually mentioned, he dropped a couple of things that were sort of like pretty puzzling at the moment, but actually quite cool. He said, first of all, I got everything from John Dewey. He literally said that. He's just like, I got all of it from John Dewey. And then the second thing, that was interesting to me is that, he sort of had originally considered it and still considered it not so much a framework for learning, but an instructional design standard, like ADDIE, except with more, gumption, with more, alignment with how people ought to or do, tend to learn,
that's because ADDIE was built by psychologists in like the 40s. Right. It was
used notably by the U.S. military in the 70s.
Right.
So
it doesn't have that teaching component. It's the psychology component, which didn't make the move over to education.
Let's open up one thing here and open up another, and then it's like Elon Musk. Have you heard the latest crazy ass thing that Elon Musk wants to do? He wants to have an app for music that bypasses your physical ear. He wants to just pipe Spotify directly into your brainstem, if you can friggin' imagine. It's like, I don't trust this dude to do anything that people are trusting him to do. It'll just be like, what, like, bro, you don't like Pearl Jam? Oh, well, what's the matter with you, you know? I don't know how I got off on that particular tangent just now, but
honestly, he seems more like a Bond villain than a human being right now.
He does. It's just, except like the most stoned, half-assed Bond villain, you know, that you could imagine. It's like, yeah, anyway, it's like, what if a Bond villain ate a brownie and then, you know, just people just started taking everything he said as like the gospel? That's freakish. That's cultish, I think. But sorry, everybody that owns a Tesla, including the taxi that drove me to and from a thing 2 days ago. But nobody's dissing electric cars. It's just your overlord is a bit too much of a bro, and he's a bit too uncanny for this life to take him seriously. But yet somehow they do. Geez, so many tangents.
Absolutely.
Let's dial it back, dude. Where are we going next? Let's go back to the one let's go back to the article that we skipped. How about that?
Yes. And I'm going to apologize to these authors because it's Davnina and Mem Betul Ayla. The importance of teaching presence in the classroom. Like I think they're from Kazakhstan, but I could be wrong.
Okay, so the Journal of New Century of Innovations, that's the journal that's sort of associated with that. That's
it. Okay. I really like their diagram, to be honest. I went in, I read their stuff, and it made sense. And the diagram just put it together nicely, right? It's like, course design and organization,
it is one hell of diagram.
Discourse, and direct instruction, and you put all of these into a big funnel, and boom, teaching presence comes out, right? And I just like the whole concept of specific guidelines associated with teaching presence. It's like, I hate this airy-fairy, let's talk in circles. And they got to the point, and they gave actual examples of actual things that we could use. And I love reading research from places that aren't North America or Britain or whatever, the other parts of the world.
I just Googled it, dude, just a second ago, just to see. So I went to the Journal of New Century Innovations, went to the About the Journal. It provides a street address, but not, an actual place. So then I just Googled the street address. So the Journal of New Century of Innovations originates in Kokand, which is a city in Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan. Right? I apologize to all the Uzbeks.
All Uzbeks who might be listening. We respect your country, though we know very little about it besides this journal. But again, this is something where when I was, and this is this is recent, right? That's a 2022 kind of deal. When I was doing my research, 10 years prior to that, 8 years prior to that, whatever. I definitely noticed a lot of COI papers showing up in like the Turkish Journal of Online Learning, or, it translates really well through, and it doesn't surprise me at all in that regard that the Commonwealth of Learning, associated as it is with UNESCO and these larger, global bodies or avenues to support e-learning, COI translates really well into those settings, and you could do a whole thing, I'm sure, like a whole meta-analysis of papers that originate in certain regions or just outside North America, because the international imprint for COI is really pretty huge, as you've alluded to here. So, and that to me is one of the strengths of it, and one of the things that makes it viable, and probably will keep it viable for years to come.
And one thing I like with some of their points are like providing students with clear goals, frequent feedback, strong direct instruction.
What you and I just call good teaching, right? I mean, honestly,
what we call good teaching. Yeah. When you're dealing with people that aren't educators yet, or they come from another field, like this isn't good teaching. This is like revolutionary to them.
Well, and in a lot of cases, I mean, you're looking at that, provide feedback, facilitate discourse and whatnot. Like, it is a thing for distance and blended learning, but it's also a thing for face-to-face learning too. It's really taken, I think, good aspects of face-to-face and sort of
Yes.
saying, how can we take this and place it within, the blended or fully distanced context, bearing in mind that when these papers were first coming out, the initial, the initial surge of the research, the first round of research, it was in the late 1990s, and the first, COI paper as such is circa 2000, 2001, when the internet was a vastly underpopulated and non-ubiquitous thing compared to what it is now. And so there was actually a need to figure out, how could this stuff translate into this new and emerging, quote unquote, internet and online format. And it's from that, it basically owes to the fact, a lot of its relevance now owes to the fact that it's not that much older than the popular use of the internet as such. It's evolved over time with it, which to me, again, I think is one of the reasons that it speaks to how and why it could still be applicable, valid, with relevance, right?
Yeah. And this ties into an experience I had when I first got hired at University of Wollongong.
Awesome.
So I had just got my PhD in education. I'd just been hired to be an education prof. And I was so
living
excited.
The dream, man.
And then they said, oh, by the way, you have to take this how to teach course. And I'm like, excuse me? And they're like, yeah, it's whatever it was. I don't know if it was a week or 2 weeks, but they put all the new profs into it. I'm like, I've been a teacher for 15 years at that point. They're like, nope, got to teach it. So I went in and I had a chip on my shoulder because I was ticked off.
Yeah.
And literally they brought people in. They said, oh, this guy, and literally it was this old white guy who came in and he said, yeah, I won the teaching award at the university last year. And he's like, yeah, I teach whatever, chemistry or biology or something. It was one of the harder sciences.
Yep.
And he said, the best thing I could tell you to do is tell the students your name. And I'm like, what? And it's like, yeah, I find the students do better and they feel more comfortable if they know who I am. And that was one of his comments was, yeah, he goes, all I had to do was write the name down on the blackboard so they knew who I was. So they knew that I was the professor and I wasn't a teaching assistant or a research assistant. And that made such a difference. People said hi to me in the classroom after that. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And you're making me take this?
That could in its own way be one of those things that's so profound it's masquerading as like a Zen metaphor, as it were. It's like, if you can grasp this, then you can probably, in a short amount of time, take the pebble from my hand, right? Or something. I would like to.
I would hope.
Maybe that person doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're insufficiently self-aware. Maybe that's sort of what you were going after there. But yeah,
it was just, he seemed to be a nice enough guy. But that was his big takeaway on how to develop some teaching presence. Oh,
names.
Your name. People like to know your name.
You might even then try memorizing a few of your students' names if you really want them to, have that extra spark, right?
Exactly.
Go figure. And then, you then wonder how that person would have felt about pronouns. Anyway.
I don't know.
It's not that we're not going there. It's just that's a discussion for another time, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm having a whale of a time. I don't know that I've necessarily contributed much in terms of adding to the academic aspect of this show, but
you have. I think you have.
Well, thank you, man. I do appreciate that. So what else we got? Are we speaking of the diagrams now, or are there any?
The only one. I'm hoping that you could take some of these and just put them into like an H5P thing, just so.
I love the opportunity because I have no other specified reason to use H5P, and I enjoy the heck out of it relative to my ed technologist past. So that'll be dope. Yeah, man.
So what I've got is Sir Ken Robinson is the last one I want to really touch on. Is
Sure.
Education is about relationships. Great teachers are not just instructors and test administrators. They are mentors, coaches, motivators, lifelong sources of inspiration for their students.
Fantastic. Who is Ken Robinson? Do you know of them?
Sir Ken Robinson is super famous. He's an English guy that ended up in California, and he did the lecture circuit. He's got like half a dozen TED Talks. What's his
motivator? So he's like that's his thing, being a motivational.
He's an educator that was on every board. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he was on every board on how to make education better.
Okay.
And it started with teaching presence. It starts with value the educators, value the students. That's where you need to start.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I could easily join a Ken Robinson fan club.
Oh.
He's just bang on.
No, that's fantastic. I'm not hitherto unaware, but I will certainly.
Okay.
I will certainly give Sir Ken a Google after this for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have in all the rest of the little cartoons and stuff for the people that want to go to the site. It's literally teachers are wonderful. Aren't teachers great? that's the theme. I have a bunch of those, right? Because I'm a digital pack rat. So I just dropped a bunch of those in.
Yeah, no, I'm just having myself a chuckle. You got some Peanuts in here. You got some Foxtrot. You got some.
I love both of them.
Bizarro. I mean, these are some OG classic comics that you got in there a bit. Yeah, that's okay. Well, in that case, those will be just sort of Easter eggs, as it were. H5P Easter eggs, in keeping with the Easterish theme thingy we got going on here. What you want to speak to the word and or the question of the podcast, friend?
Both, please. The word of the podcast is going to be teaching, because I'm pretty sure we said it 50 times, and that's what it seemed to be about. It's the actual teaching, not just the role of being a teacher, or not just the learner. It's teaching as a whole, and how the COIs value it, and how important it has to be, and how that Venn diagram makes everything fit. And the question of the podcast is, how do you develop teaching presence when you're in an educational role? And so that's, if anybody comments and lets us know what they think about that, when we do get stickers, I promise to mail you one.
Well, and that's fantastic too. And I guess I would just say, how do you do teaching presence? I mean, that is just that's an ongoing question, right? That's something where, like, within my journey, within my experience, I've been fortunate enough, as I said, I sort of talked about my sort of my experience, maybe having a challenge with my own approach towards that online, course that I was teaching, that grad level education class for UNB. But one of the great joys I got from that was that largely the people coming into that program were educators already, whether it's K to 12, there were people in the corporate sector, there were people who worked for the military, professional instructional designers, just people who were trying to sort of advance their careers and just finding out about their settings. So, my approach within that was really everything that they came up with was meant to hopefully have a practical purpose as a curricular or teaching aid or whatnot, relative to their own setting, relative to their own educational situation, wherein they had largely a teaching responsibility of some kind. And to me, just finding out and learning all about those different settings, similarly when I taught or facilitated the BC micro course on hybrid and HighFlex for BC campus, a week-long thing. It was just everybody who was there as an educator had their own story to tell, had their own situation. So that was just something that really I was always really grateful for. So that's probably just one of my favorite questions of the podcast we've had thus far, Doug. So I appreciate that, man.
Oh, you're welcome. If you ever want to come up with some of these, that will be cool too.
I can't guarantee that I will, but I certainly
if anything ever strikes your mind at some point, that'd be cool. That's fine.
Yeah.
No pressure.
This is me being struck in my mind by something. Just bop, bop.
Yeah, seriously, because as we talk, all kinds of stuff comes up. So
yeah, no, and this is why a robust, transcript harvesting and thematic annotation and possibly case study or grounded theory kind of analysis will surely be a part of this endeavor whenever we want to take a month off from doing shows to crunch in such a manner. That's, again, one of the great benefits of the online is, the persistence of these kind of learning objects, such as these recordings and the associated ephemera. They lend themselves to further, review. It's not just like people can just click on this stuff and check it out at their leisure, which is extremely important, and that's the primary reason we do it. But it enables us as thoughtful, hopefully, educators ourselves and researchers, in our own, kind of ways to be able to pull it out and speak to it and go back over it, pretty easily, pretty readily. And quite frankly, if you're an educational researcher and you're seeing something here that we're doing that you would like to check in about or question or, even just come up with apart from us, we I think both Doug and I would be very interested to hear from you or about it for that matter. So, dude, yeah, I think we're doing all right here. Is there anything else we want to kind of get into before we say sayonara for the thing, or?
No, just one thing I didn't mention is the T-shirt that Today New Brunswick, Tomorrow the World, that's for your other podcast. So for any listeners that haven't heard, Dr. Matt has more than one.
Right, and I the other one is there's a lot of swearing and it's completely non-educational, except in as much as you might learn a thing or two about punk music, if that's your vibe at all. And as I said before, I've actually glomed or basically aped the template for the punk music podcast. It looks very different content, but the format is very largely taken from this. So I think that ENT logo that you came up with is definitely stickers, yes. Magnets, yes. And I would be very surprised if it doesn't appear on a T-shirt offering at some point down the line as well, since I've already greased the track, so to speak, for that particular thing, to happen. So
that's the joy about us being lifelong learners, right? This is all learning artifacts for us because we're learning as we're going and we're sharing our learning. Right, like we've fallen in some ditches and we admit it, and then we pick ourselves up and try something else.
We're not going to be precious about it. If you're going to be precious as an educator about do I look dumb or not, then you're in the wrong business. You're going to look dumb. You're going to look dumb more often than not. And those moments when people are like coming at you like, thanks for being open, thanks for taking the risk. It's like there was no other way to do it, that was going to be meaningful, right? You got to take a risk if you're going to lower a boundary, and then really lowering boundaries is really one of the key aspects of moving forward, of getting to the good stuff, enhancing the cognitive presence or whatever, the broader educational enterprise. Yeah. So we don't claim any great authority on any of these stuff, which is why we have the question of the day, we have the word of the day, all these things, all these through lines. It's like we welcome the interaction, and we certainly appreciate your anybody who's even checking this out just for a moment, even if it's in a negative or troll-like way. We dig it. So I think probably that's
one last thing.
Please.
Is we might have a new marketing direction starting in a couple of weeks. I just want to put that out there as a teaser for people.
I'm considering myself teased because I think, hearing about this for the first time. I'm looking forward to learning more.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have dropped that on you. But okay, anyway, yeah.
Easter eggs, man. Easter surprise.
It is.
That's what I'm calling that. Let's
It
go.
is. It is.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have anything else, so I'm going to wrap it up unless you've got stuff.
I think I'm fine. I'm more than fine. I always enjoy this, Doug. I always get a
Me
kick
too.
out of this.
Me too.
So until next time, and this will be landing in your pod thingy within the Easter weekend for sure.
And what's funny is it's really instantaneous for them. We're the only ones that have that time impacts this chronological.
It's true. It's true. Okay. Well, again, thanks for checking this out. Whenever and wherever and however you are, and we will hopefully take it up with you again next time.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye for now.